I sat in the dark with a single candle, realizing my family hadn't just forgotten me, they had erased me. But when the invoice for their luxury cruise arrived days later, I didn't get mad. I simply closed the Bank of Emma forever. This is where the silence gets louder than the screaming, and trust me, you'll want to see how I handle that knock at the door. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the fallout. We'd love to know, where are you tuning in from today? Drop your country in the comments. The vanilla frosting had started to crust over. That was the detail that finally broke me. I was sitting on the floor of my apartment, my back pressed against the cold drywall of the living room, staring at a small, pink cardboard box from the bakery down the street. Inside were 2 gourmet cupcakes, 1 lemon, 1 vanilla bean. I had bought them myself at 5:30 p.m., right after logging off from work, telling the barista with a forced, brittle smile that they were for a small get-together. That was the first lie of the night. There was no get-together. There was just me, the humming of the refrigerator, and the glowing numbers on the digital clock of the microwave. 11:58 p.m. 2 minutes left. My phone lay on the floor next to my thigh, its screen dark. For the last 16 hours, I had treated it like a bomb that might detonate at any moment. I had checked it obsessively, practically vibrating with a pathetic, childish hope. Every time it buzzed with a spam email or a notification from a news app, my heart would leap into my throat, only to crash back down into my stomach when I saw it wasn't them. It wasn't Mom, it wasn't Dad, it wasn't my brother. I was turning 30. This wasn't just a Tuesday, it was a milestone. It was the decade where I was supposed to have it all figured out. And technically, on paper, I did. I was a senior UX designer. I made 6 figures. I had a beautiful apartment with exposed brick and a view of the city skyline. I had a 401k and a diversified portfolio. I was the success story. But as the microwave clock flickered to 11:59 p.m., I felt like a hollowed-out husk. I reached for the phone one last time, unlocking it and navigating to Instagram. I shouldn't have done it. I knew I shouldn't have done it, but the masochistic urge to know the truth was stronger than my self-preservation. There, at the top of the feed, was a story posted 3 hours ago. It was a photo of my parents, William and Bday, sitting at a high-top table in a sports bar. They were laughing, holding up pint glasses of beer. And sitting between them, looking tan and relaxed in a fitted polo shirt, was Matthew, my older brother. The caption read, "Just because it's a Tuesday doesn't mean we can't celebrate. Family night with the golden boy." My breath hitched in my chest, a sharp, ragged sound that echoed in the empty room. They weren't busy. They weren't in the hospital. They weren't asleep. They were out, together, celebrating family night on the one day of the year that belonged to me. I stared at the photo until the lines of their smiling faces began to blur. Bday looked so happy, her eyes crinkled in that way that usually made me feel warm and safe. William had his arms slung proudly around Matthew's shoulders. They looked like a unit, a fortress, a complete set. There was no gap where I should have been. They didn't look like they were missing anyone. The microwave beeped softly, 12:00 a.m. My birthday was over. I didn't cry. I think I was too dehydrated from the anxiety of the day to produce tears. Instead, a heavy, suffocating blanket of realization settled over me. It wasn't just that they forgot. People forget dates. People get busy. If they had been at home watching TV and just slipped up, I could have forgiven it. But they hadn't forgotten to go out. They hadn't forgotten to celebrate each other. They had actively chosen to spend my birthday together, without me, and post about it. I looked at the crusty vanilla cupcake. I picked it up, peeled back the paper liner, and took a bite. It tasted like sugar and ash. I swallowed it down, feeling it scrape against my dry throat, and placed the wrapper back in the box. I was 30 years old, and I finally understood my role in this family. I wasn't a member, I was a utility. I was the person you called when the internet was down, or when the rent was late, or when you needed a loan that would never be repaid. But when it came time to laugh, when it came time to raise a glass, I didn't exist. The betrayal was worse than the loneliness. It was the quiet confirmation that I was entirely disposable. The next week passed in a haze of gray static. I went to work. I sat in Zoom meetings. I moved pixels around on a screen. I nodded when my manager asked if I had a good weekend, mumbling something about keeping it low-key. I felt like I was moving through water, every limb heavy, my brain wrapped in cot. Physically, I was a wreck. I wasn't sleeping. I'd wake up at 3:00 a.m., my mind racing, replaying scenes from my childhood, looking for the clues I had obviously missed. Had they always been this cold? Had I just been buying their affection for so long that I couldn't tell the difference between love and a transaction? I stopped calling them. Usually, I was the one who initiated contact. I called Mom on her lunch break. I texted Dad articles about vintage cars I knew he liked. I sent memes to Matthew. But for 7 days, I went radio silent. And for 7 days, my phone did not ring. It was a test, I realized. A test they were failing spectacularly, and they didn't even know they were taking it. Every hour of silence was another brick in the wall I was slowly, subconsciously building around myself. Then came Tuesday, exactly 1 week after my birthday. I was in the middle of a design sprint, sharing my screen with 3 other designers, when my desktop iMessage notification pinged in the top right corner. It was the Family Circle group chat. My heart hammered against my ribs. This is it, I thought. They realized. They saw the date. They're apologizing. I quickly stopped sharing my screen, muttering an apology about a sensitive notification, and clicked on the message. It wasn't an apology. It was a link. Specifically, a link to a Royal Caribbean cruise itinerary for a 7-night Western Mediterranean voyage. Then a message from Matthew. Boom, check this out. Family reunion cruise, dates are next month. I already talked to the travel agent, and we can get the deluxe ocean view suites if we book by Friday. Then a message from Bday. Oh, look at that blue water. It looks like heaven. Your father and I haven't been on a vacation in years. William chimed in, looks expensive, but worth it for the memories. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. I scrolled up. The last message in the chat was from 2 weeks ago when I had sent a picture of a new plant I bought. No one had reacted to it. And now this. Then came the kicker, the message that made the bile rise in my throat. Matthew, so here's the breakdown. It's about $3,500 per person if we want the drink package and excursions, which we obviously do. Emma, I figured you've got Mom and Dad covered, right? Since you're the big shot with the corporate job now. I'll cover my own ticket, but things are a little tight with the business launch, so if you could front the deposit for everyone, I'll pay you back my share when my liquidity event hits in Q3. I read it 3 times. You've got Mom and Dad covered, right? Not happy belated birthday, not how are you, not we missed you. Just an invoice. I stood up from my desk and walked to the bathroom. I locked the door, knelt in front of the toilet, and dry heaved. My body was physically rejecting the audacity of it. It was a visceral reaction to being used. They wanted me to spend $10,500, plus Matthew's deposit, which I knew from experience I would never see again. That was nearly $14,000. They wanted a free vacation. They wanted the luxury, the ocean views, the unlimited drinks, and they wanted the invisible daughter to foot the bill. I washed my face with freezing cold water, staring at my reflection. I looked pale, dark circles under my eyes, but something was shifting behind my gaze. The sadness was evaporating, burned away by a white-hot flare of rage. I went back to my desk. I didn't reply immediately. I let the messages sit there. Bday added, Emma, did you see the link? It looks perfect. We really need this break, honey. Dad's back has been acting up. The manipulation was so clumsy, so transparent. Using my father's health, which was fine enough for beers at a sports bar a week ago, to guilt me into spending thousands of dollars. I looked at my banking app. I had the money. I had saved aggressively for a down payment on a house, a dream I had been nurturing for 5 years. They knew I had savings. They didn't know how much, but they knew I was comfortable. They treated me like a vault, assuming the combination would never change. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. I was the one who held the keys. To understand why this text message felt like a knife in the back, you have to understand the history of the Bank of Emma. It started when I was 22, right out of college. I landed my first junior design job. It wasn't amazing pay, but it was steady. That same month, William retired early. It wasn't a planned retirement. He just quit his job at the plant because he didn't like the new management. Bday called me, crying. They were short on the mortgage. Just this once, she said, just until the pension kicked in. I paid it $1,200. I ate instant ramen for 3 weeks to make up for it. Then it was the water heater. Then it was the car insurance. Then it was dental work. Over the last 8 years, just this once became a monthly subscription to their lifestyle. I had paid off their credit cards twice. I had bought them a new HVAC system. I had essentially subsidized their entire existence so they wouldn't have to downgrade their lifestyle. And then there was Matthew. Matthew, my brother, was 34 years old. He was charming, handsome, and utterly useless. He had never held a traditional job for more than 6 months. He was an entrepreneur. First, it was a dropshipping business. I loaned him $2,000 for inventory. The inventory never materialized, but he did get a new gaming PC. Then it was a crypto investment scheme. I refused to give him money for that one, and Bday didn't speak to me for a month, telling me I was stifling his potential and that I should support my brother's dreams. Currently, Matthew was an aspiring life coach. He posted inspirational quotes on Instagram and claimed he was building a high-ticket client base. In reality, he lived in the finished basement of my parents' house, a basement I had paid to have renovated 3 years ago so he could have his own space. Matthew was the antagonist of my life, but he was a subtle one. He didn't hit me, he drained me. He was a vampire with a smile. He knew exactly how to play our parents. He was the one physically present, the one who watched football with Dad and went shopping with Mom. He gave them his time, which they valued more than my money, even though my money was the only reason they had the freedom to enjoy that time. He controlled the narrative. To them, Matthew was the struggling genius who just needed a break. I was the cold, corporate machine who threw money at problems but wasn't warm like him. I looked back at the group chat. Matthew's request for $3,500 wasn't just greed, it was a power move. He wanted to be the hero who organized the family reunion, the one who brought everyone together for a glorious Mediterranean cruise. But he wanted me to pay for his glory. He wanted the credit without the cost. I could hear his voice in my head, that smooth, dismissive tone he always used when I asked about repayment. Come on, Em, don't be such a bean counter. We're family. Money is just energy, it flows in and out. It flowed out of me and into him. That was the only direction it ever moved. I thought about the last time I saw them, 2 months ago at Thanksgiving. I had driven 4 hours to get there. I brought 3 pies and a case of expensive wine. Matthew had walked in 20 minutes late, empty-handed, wearing a $200 hoodie I knew he couldn't afford. When we sat down for dinner, Bday had made a toast. To Matthew, she had said, beaming, for finally getting his website launched. We are so proud of your vision. Nobody toasted my promotion to senior lead. Nobody asked about the project I had just shipped to 2 million users. I sat there, eating dry turkey, realizing I was just the silent investor in the Matthew show. And now, the investor was closing the fund. I looked at the message again. You're paying for Mom and Dad, right? The entitlement dripped off the screen. It wasn't a question, it was an instruction. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. For the first time in my life, the fear of losing them didn't outweigh the pain of keeping them. The tether that had snapped on my birthday was now whipping around to lash back at them. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to explain that it was my birthday last week. I wasn't going to beg for an apology they weren't capable of giving. I was going to do something much more permanent. I didn't reply to the group chat immediately. My thumb hovered over the keyboard, trembling slightly, not from fear, but from a sudden, overwhelming clarity. The old Emma would have typed out a soft excuse. The old Emma would have said, "I can't afford the whole thing right now, but maybe I can help with the deposit." The old Emma would have apologized for existing. But the old Emma died the moment she ate a stale cupcake alone in the dark, while her family toasted her absence on her own dime. I set the phone down on my desk, face down. I needed to see the damage. I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with before I engaged. I opened my laptop and logged into the family emergency bank account I had set up 5 years ago. It was a joint checking account I shared with my father, William. The agreement was simple. I deposited $500 a month into it for true emergencies, medical deductibles, a blown tire, a sudden home repair. They were supposed to ask before using it, but over time, they had stopped asking, and I had stopped checking the statements, blindly trusting that they wouldn't abuse the safety net I provided. I clicked on transaction history. The balance, which should have been around $6,000 based on my automatic deposits, was $42.18. I felt a cold flush spread from my neck to my cheeks. I clicked to expand the last 90 days of activity. January 14, DraftKings. $200 January 16, Liquor World. $85.50 January 20, ATM with Rawl Casino Floor. $400 January 22, GameStop. $65 January 24, Prestige Auto Detail. $150. My father didn't gamble. My father didn't play video games. And my father drove a beat-up 2014 Ford that he washed in the driveway with a hose. Matthew. I scrolled back further. It was a hemorrhage. Gas stations, snacks, vape shops, online subscriptions to premium sports channels. It was a steady stream of my hard-earned money flowing directly into Matthew's pockets, disguised as family expenses. My parents had given him the debit card. They had handed the keys to the vault to the very person I was trying to protect them from. Then I saw it, the transaction that made the room spin. Tuesday, January 23, the Rusty Anchor Bar and Grill. $184.50. The date of my birthday. I clicked on the transaction details. It was timestamped 8:42 p.m. They hadn't just gone out without me. They hadn't just ignored my existence. I had paid for the celebration. I had paid for the beer they drank. I had paid for the wings they ate. I had paid for the very meal where they took that photo, smiling and laughing about family night, while I sat alone wondering what was wrong with me. A sound escaped my throat, a harsh, jagged laugh that sounded like glass breaking. It was absurd. It was almost impressive in its cruelty. They used the daughter they ignored to fund the celebration of the son who contributed nothing. I opened a new tab. I logged into the credit card portal for the authorized user card I gave my mother, Veda, for groceries only. Pending, Royal Caribbean hold $500. They hadn't waited for my reply. They had already tried to book the cruise using the emergency card. It was only pending because it had triggered a fraud alert I hadn't seen yet in my email spam folder. I wasn't a daughter to them. I wasn't a person. I was a resource. I was a walking, talking line of credit with a heartbeat, and like any resource that had been overmined, I was tapped out. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I went into senior UX designer mode. I approached this like a broken system architecture that needed to be decommissioned. Step 1, the screenshot. I took a screenshot of the Rusty Anchor transaction. I circled the date and the amount in bright red. Step 2, the shutdown. I called the bank. I navigated the automated menu with robotic precision until I got a human representative. I need to close a joint account immediately due to unauthorized use, I told the operator, my voice steady and flat. Certainly, ma'am, we can freeze it. No, close it. Transfer the remaining $42.18 to my personal savings and shut it down completely. Cancel all associated debit cards. Next, the credit card. I reported the card ending in 4598, my mother's card, as lost, stolen, and requested the account be terminated, not reissued. Next, the phone plan. I logged into Verizon. There were 4 lines. I selected 3 of them, William, Veda, Matthew, and clicked Suspend Service. Then, I initiated a transfer of liability request to my father's email address. They had 24 hours to assume the payments, or the lines would be permanently disconnected. Finally, the streaming services. Netflix, Hulu, Spotify Family Plan, password change, password change, password change. Log out of all devices. It took me 45 minutes to dismantle the financial infrastructure that had supported them for a decade. When I was done, I felt lighter, as if I had physically shed 100 pounds of dead weight. I picked up my phone. The group chat was still waiting. Matthew, hello, Earth to Emma, don't leave us hanging, the deal expires soon. I opened the image gallery. I selected the screenshot of the bar tab from my birthday. I typed 2 words, account closed. I hit send. Then before the read receipts could even populate, I went to the group settings. Block contact, Matthew, block contact, Mom, block contact, Dad. I didn't stop there. I went to social media. Facebook blocked. Instagram blocked. I locked my front door, engaged the deadbolt, and for the first time in a week I exhaled. The silence lasted exactly 12 minutes. That was how long it took for them to realize that account closed wasn't a metaphor. My phone, despite the blocks, started showing blocked call notifications in the voicemail log. First 1, then 3, then 10. The sheer volume of attempts was staggering. In 12 minutes, they had tried to contact me more times than they had in the entire previous year. But I had forgotten one loophole: email. My inbox pinged. It was Veda. Subject, emergency, CARDS not working, Emma, honey, something is wrong. I tried to buy gas and the card was declined. Your father is at the pharmacy and his card isn't working either. We are trying to call you, but it goes straight to voicemail. Please call us back immediately. Dad needs his blood pressure medication. I stared at the screen. The manipulation was instant. Dad needs his medi. Cation, not why did you send that screenshot? Not we are sorry. But an immediate pivot to a life-or-death crisis to force my hand. I knew for a fact that the pharmacy they used had a pay-later option for seniors, and that the copay was only $15. William had $40 cash in his wallet at all times. It was a quirk of his. He could pay for it. This was a test of compliance. I didn't reply. 20 minutes later, an email from Matthew. Subject, WTF, you're acting like a child, you block us. Really? Because we asked for a vacation? Mom is crying in the kitchen, you need to grow up and talk to us. Also, that bar tab wasn't what you think. I treated them for your birthday because you weren't there. I was doing a nice thing. Unblock me. The gaslighting was breathtaking. I treated them for your birthday. As if using my money to buy them beer while I sat alone was an act of charity toward me. I realized then that silence wasn't enough. They were creating a narrative where I was the villain, the unstable, cruel daughter punishing her elderly parents. If I stayed silent, Matthew would spin this until I looked like a monster. I needed to go on the record. I opened a new email draft. I addressed it to all 3 of them. To William, Veda, Matthew. Subject, clarification of financial termination. I am writing this to ensure there is no confusion regarding my previous message. Effective immediately, I have closed the joint checking account ending in 8890. I have canceled the credit card ending in 4598. I have suspended your phone lines and removed you from all shared digital subscriptions. Regarding Matthew's claim that he treated you for my birthday, the transaction record shows that card 8890, funded exclusively by my payroll deposits, paid the bill. I paid $184.50 to be excluded from my own 30th birthday. That was the final expense I will ever cover for this family. Do not come to my apartment. Do not call my work. If you attempt to contact me, I will consider it harassment. You have relied on my financial support for 8 years. As of today, you are on your own. Emma. I hit send. I sat back, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. It felt dangerous. Saying no to people who are accustomed to hearing yes is a revolutionary act, and revolutions are always messy. The backlash was immediate and nuclear. My work email, which they should not have used, pinged. From Matthew to Emma, work CC. My boss's public email subject: Urgent family matter Emma, please call home. Mom is worried about your mental state. You're acting erratically and we're concerned you might be having a breakdown. We just want to help. He had copied my boss. My blood ran cold. This was war. Matthew knew exactly what he was doing. He was trying to discredit me professionally. If I was unstable, then my cutting them off wasn't a rational decision. It was a symptom of mental illness. It was a strategy to undermine my agency so they could swoop in and manage my assets again. I walked into my kitchen and poured a glass of water, my hands shaking uncontrollably now. I had to get ahead of this. I forwarded Matthew's email to my personal HR representative, along with a brief, professional note. Please be advised that I am currently navigating a difficult family estrangement. My brother is attempting to use my workplace as a means of harassment. I am safe and healthy, but please disregard any further communications from him. Then, I did something I should have done years ago. I pulled up the folder on my hard drive labeled scans. I began to organize the evidence, the bank statements, the text messages asking for money, the promises of repayment that never materialized. I built a timeline. 2019, $4,500 loan for Matthew's car repair, never repaid. 2020, $2,000 for Mom's dental. Mom later admitted it was for Matthew's rent. 2022, $8,000 for roof repair. Roof was never fixed. I totaled it up. Over 8 years, I had given them $64,300. That wasn't support. That was a salary. I had been employing my family to love me, and they had quiet quit years ago. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across my living room. I didn't turn on the lights. I felt like a soldier in a bunker, waiting for the shelling to start. And then the threats shifted. A text from an unknown number, likely a burner app Matthew used. You think you can just cut us off? You think you're better than us? Watch what happens when people find out who you really are. You're leaving your parents to rot. Selfish bitch. I didn't reply, I screenshotted it. I added it to the folder. I was building a fortress of facts. They had stories, they had tears, they had guilt, but I had receipts. And in the end, receipts are the only things that hold up in court. The next 48 hours were a masterclass in psychological warfare. Matthew launched a smear campaign on Facebook. He didn't name me directly, he was too smart for that, but the posts were public and designed to inflict maximum damage. It's heartbreaking when money changes people. You sacrifice everything to raise a child, support them, cheer for them, and the second they get a little taste of corporate success, they turn their back on family. Hug your loved ones tight tonight. We're devastated. The comments were flooded with sympathy from extended family members I hadn't seen in years. Aunt Carol, so sorry to hear this, Veda, praying for you. Cousin Mike, some people forget where they came from. I scrolled through the comments, feeling a strange detachment. They were talking about a fictional character. They were talking about a greedy, heartless daughter who abandoned her saintly parents. They didn't know about the $64,000. They didn't know about the birthday alone. They didn't know about the cruise invoice. I wanted to reply. I wanted to post the screenshots in the comments and burn their narrative to the ground. But I knew that engaging would only fuel the fire. Silence was my strongest weapon, even if it hurt to wield it. I stayed inside. I had groceries delivered. I worked from home, keeping my Slack status to focus mode. On Thursday afternoon, 2 days after the account closed message, the escalation reached its peak. I was in the middle of a code review when a heavy, authoritative pounding echoed from my front door. Bang, bang, bang. It wasn't the UPS guy. It wasn't a neighbor. That was the knock of authority. My stomach dropped. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. 2 uniformed police officers stood in the hallway. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. They actually did it, I thought. They called the cops. I took a deep breath, smoothed down my sweater, and unlocked the deadbolt. I opened the door just enough to be polite but firm. "Good afternoon, officers," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Can I help you?" The older officer, a man with a graying mustache, looked at his notepad. "Are you Emma? We received a call requesting a welfare check at this address." "I am Emma," I said. "I'm fine. Who called?" "The call came from a Mr. Matthew last name and a Mrs. Veda last name," the officer said, peering past me into the apartment. "They stated that you've been making threats of self-harm and sending erratic, incoherent messages. They're very concerned about your mental stability." The rage flared hot and bright, but I doused it instantly with ice-cold logic. If I got angry, if I yelled, if I cried, I would prove Matthew right. I had to be the sanest person they had ever met. "I see," I said, stepping back and opening the door wider. "Officers, please come in. I apologize that my family has wasted your time." They stepped into my apartment. It was immaculate. My workstation was set up. There were no signs of struggle, no chaotic mess, no evidence of a breakdown. "I am in the middle of a workday," I explained calmly. "I am a senior UX designer. I am currently perfectly healthy." I walked over to my laptop. The reality, officers, is that 2 days ago, I stopped paying my adult brother's bills. I cut off their financial access after years of abuse. This welfare check is not about my safety. It is a retaliation tactic to intimidate me into reopening my wallet. I picked up the folder of printed screenshots I had prepared, almost as if I had known this moment would come. "Here," I said, handing the file to the older officer. "This is the email I sent them calmly explaining the financial cutoff. These are the threatening texts my brother sent me yesterday, and here is the email he sent to my boss trying to get me fired." The officer flipped through the pages. His eyebrows went up. He showed the text message screenshot to his partner. "He said you were sending gibberish," the partner noted. "This looks like a bank statement." "Exactly," I said. "They equate me saying no with insanity." The older officer closed the folder and handed it back to me. His demeanor softened instantly. He looked tired. He had probably seen this dynamic 100 times before, weaponized concern used by manipulative relatives. "I'm sorry to disturb you, ma'am," he said, his tone respectful. "You appear to be in no distress. We have to follow up on these calls, but it's clear this is a civil matter." "I understand," I said. "Can I ask you to do one thing for me?" "What's that?" "Please document in your report that I am lucid, safe, and employed. And please inform the callers that if they send police to my home again, I will be filing charges for filing a false police report and harassment." The officer nodded grimly. "We will definitely let them know that. Have a good day, Emma." They left. I closed the door and locked it. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood of the door. They had tried to humiliate me. They had tried to have me dragged out of my own home in front of my neighbors. They wanted to break me so badly that they were willing to involve the law. But they had miscalculated. They thought the police would see a hysterical spinster daughter. Instead, the police saw a composed professional with a paper trail. I wasn't afraid anymore. The fear had evaporated, replaced by a crystalline sense of purpose. I walked to the window and looked out at the city. I was alone. My phone was silent. My family hated me. And for the first time in 30 years, standing in that quiet room, I felt a profound, overwhelming sense of peace. The police visit had been the warning shot. The ambush came 3 days later. It was Saturday morning. I had decided to venture out for the first time since the welfare check. I needed coffee, fresh air, and the simple reassurance that I still existed in the physical world outside of my apartment walls. I dressed carefully: jeans, a blazer, sunglasses, armor. My apartment building had a large, glass-walled lobby with a concierge desk and a seating area for guests. Usually, it was a quiet, transitional space where people nodded politely and kept moving. As the elevator doors slid open on the ground floor, I heard the voice. It wasn't a shout, it was worse. It was a theatrical, sobbing plea. "We just want to see her. She's not well. You have to let us up, it's a medical emergency." My stomach dropped through the floor. I stepped out of the elevator and saw them. Matthew was standing at the concierge desk, leaning over the counter, aggressively gesturing at the terrified weekend security guard, a young guy named Kevin. Bday was sitting on one of the velvet sofas, her face buried in a handkerchief, weeping audibly. William stood awkwardly beside her, looking at the floor, his posture slumped in defeat. They had staged a scene. They were playing the role of the desperate, loving family trying to save their mentally ill daughter from herself. I could have turned back. I could have pressed the button for the 14th floor and hidden in my fortress. But something in me, that same cold, hard clarity that had helped me close the bank accounts, snapped into place. I was done running. I walked across the marble floor, my heels clicking sharply. The sound cut through the lobby like a gavel strike. "Kevin," I said, my voice projecting clearly across the room, "you don't need to let them up. I'm right here." The tableau froze. Bday's head snapped up. Matthew spun around, his face shifting instantly from concerned brother to arrogant bully. "Emma," Matthew shouted, marching toward me with his arms open, as if he were going to hug me. "Thank God, we've been so worried. Look at you, you look terrible." I didn't flinch, I didn't step back, I held up a hand, palm out. "Stop, do not come any closer." He stopped, blinking. "Emma, stop the drama, we're here to help you. Mom is a wreck. We're going to take you home, get you some help, and sort this mess out." "There is no mess, Matthew," I said, loud enough for the two neighbors waiting for their Uber to hear. "There is just a closed bank account." Bday stood up, her face blotchy. "Emma, please," she wailed, walking toward me. "Why are you doing this to us? Why are you punishing us? We love you. We just want to be a family again." "You want a family cruise, Mom," I said, my voice trembling slightly but gaining strength. "You don't want me, you want the wallet." "That is a lie," Matthew snapped, his face reddening. "This is exactly what we told the police. You're paranoid, you think everyone is using you, you're sick, Emma." He looked around the lobby, performing for the audience. "She's having a breakdown," he told the neighbors near the door. "She's delusional." Am I? I reached into my bag. I didn't pull out a weapon. I pulled out the file. The same file I had shown the police, but updated. "Kevin," I said to the guard, "please call the police non-emergency line again. Tell them the people who filed the false report on Thursday are now trespassing." "You wouldn't," William said, speaking for the first time. His voice was hoarse. "Emma, we are your parents." "Then start acting like it?" I screamed. The sound tore out of my throat, raw and agonizing. The composure cracked, just for a second, revealing the 30 years of pain underneath. Parents don't forget their child's 30th birthday to go drinking with their brother. Parents don't invoice their daughter for $14,000 for a vacation she wasn't invited to. The lobby went dead silent. The neighbors stopped looking at their phones. I turned to Bday. "You want to know why I'm paranoid? Here." I threw the papers onto the low coffee table between us. They fanned out, bank statements, highlighted in neon yellow. "January 23rd, I pointed, my finger shaking. "My birthday. You spent $184.50 at the Rusty Anchor. You posted a photo about family night. And you paid for it with my debit card, the card I gave you for groceries. You bought Matthew's beer with the money I worked for while I sat alone in my apartment." Bday looked down at the paper. She saw the date. She saw the amount. She saw the signature on the receipt, Matthew. He told us, Veda whispered, looking up at Matthew. He told us he paid. He said he had a good month with his clients. He has no clients, Mom, I shouted. He has me. I am the client. I have been paying his rent, his car insurance, his business expenses for 8 years. I paid for the roof. I paid for the water heater. And the second I stopped, the second I closed the tap, he called the police and told them I was crazy. I turned to Matthew. He looked cornered. His slick, confident mask was slipping, revealing the panic of a parasite losing its host. You're lying, he spat. She's doctoring the papers, she's. It's over, Matthew, I said, my voice dropping to a deadly calm. I have the fraud alerts. I have the police report from Thursday. And now I have witnesses. I gestured to the concierge and the neighbors. If you do not leave this building in 30 seconds, I will have you arrested for harassment and trespassing. And I will sue you for the $64,000 you stole from me. I have the receipts for every cent. Matthew looked at William. Dad, tell her to shut up. Tell her she's crazy. William looked at the papers on the table. He looked at the bold, red ink where I had circled the gambling debts and the liquor store runs. He looked at his son. For the first time in my life, I saw my father look at Matthew not with pride, but with disgust. You said you paid for dinner, William muttered. I did, I managed the funds. It's all the same family pot, Matthew stammered. It was her pot, William said, his voice rising. It was her money. Dad, come on, Matthew sneered. She owes us, we raised her. Get out, I said. Matthew stepped toward me, his hand raised as if to point a finger in my face. Kevin, the security guard, stepped out from behind the desk. He wasn't a big guy, but he had a radio and a very serious expression. Sir, I need you to leave the property immediately. Police are on the way. Matthew looked at the guard, then at me, then at our parents. He sneered, a look of pure, unfiltered hatred. Fine, keep your money. You're going to die alone, Emma. Nobody likes you. We just tolerated you because you paid. The truth hung in the air, toxic and undeniable. He had finally said the quiet part out loud. Veda let out a sharp gasp, her hand flying to her mouth. Go, I whispered. Matthew stormed out, the glass doors swinging violently behind him. I stood there, shaking, adrenaline flooding my system. I looked at my parents. They stood amidst the wreckage of the lie they had lived in for a decade. The golden child had revealed himself to be brass. Emma, Veda sobbed, reaching for me. No, I said, stepping back. You need to leave too. But how do we get home? William asked, looking lost. Matthew drove. I don't know, I said, turning my back on them and walking toward the elevator. Figure it out. The fallout was slow, painful, and necessary. Like setting a broken bone, it had to hurt before it could heal. I didn't see them for 3 weeks. In that time, the silence in my life changed. It wasn't the lonely, heavy silence of my birthday. It was the peaceful, productive silence of a sanctuary. I slept 8 hours a night. I focused at work. I started painting again, a hobby I had abandoned years ago because materials were too expensive when I was funding 3 other adults. Matthew tried to claw his way back, of course. He sent emails from library computers. He sent long, rambling manifestos about karma and ungrateful sisters. I forwarded every single one to the police officer who had done the welfare check, adding them to the file. Eventually, the reality of his situation hit him. Without my subsidies, and with Mom and Dad's accounts locked down, his lifestyle evaporated. I heard through a cousin that he had to sell his gaming setup. Then his car. Last I heard, he was working part-time at a warehouse, living in a studio apartment 3 towns over because my parents, finally, miraculously, had told him he couldn't live in the basement if he wasn't contributing. The confrontation in the lobby had broken something in Veda and William. It had shattered the delusion. They couldn't unhear what Matthew had said to me. We just tolerated you because you paid. One Tuesday evening, exactly a month after the lobby incident, the intercom buzzed. I looked at the monitor. It was Veda. She was alone. She wasn't holding a handkerchief. She was holding a Tupperware container. I hesitated. My finger hovered over the unlock button. I didn't need to let her up. I didn't need anything from them ever again. I was free. But I pressed the button. When I opened my apartment door, she looked smaller than I remembered. Older. The stress of the last month had etched deep lines into her face. She stood in the hallway, clutching the plastic container like a lifeline. "I made lasagna," she said quietly. "Vegetarian, the way you like it, with the spinach." I looked at the container. "I don't need food, Mom." "I know," she said. She looked down at her shoes. "I know you don't need anything from us. That's what I finally realized." She took a breath, looking up at me with watery eyes. "I went to the bank, Emma. I had them print out everything, for the last 5 years." I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. And I threw up," she said bluntly. "I sat in the parking lot and I threw up. I saw the transfers. I saw the dates. I saw the times you told me you were eating rice and beans to save money, and the same week Matthew spent $300 on sneakers." She started to cry, but it wasn't the performative wailing from the lobby. It was a quiet, ashamed weeping. "We let him do it," she whispered. "We liked that he was home. We liked that he was fun, and we used you. We used you, Emma, because you were the strong one, because you never said no. We punished you for being responsible." She placed the lasagna on the small table by my entry. "I kicked him out," she said. "He's gone. Dad changed the locks yesterday." I felt a lump form in my throat. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. Forgiveness is a landscape you have to travel across, not a door you just walk through. But it was validation. It was the truth. "Why didn't you call me on my birthday?" I asked, the question that had started it all. Bday flinched. Matthew said you were working. He said he texted you and you said you were too busy for us. He said, 'Let's just go out, she doesn't want to be bothered.'" "And you believed him." "It was easier to believe him," she admitted, her voice breaking. "Because if we believed him, we didn't have to feel guilty about having fun without you." She looked at me, her eyes pleading. "I am so sorry, Emma. I don't expect you to open the accounts again. I don't want your money. Dad got a part-time job at the hardware store. We're going to figure it out. I wanted you to know that I see you now. I see what we did." I looked at this woman who had failed me so profoundly, but who was now standing in my hallway, stripped of her delusions, trying to hand me a lasagna. I didn't hug her. I wasn't ready for that. The scars were too fresh. "Thank you for the lasagna," I said softly. Bday nodded, wiping her face. Okay. She stepped back. "Happy birthday, Emma. I know it's late, but happy birthday." "Good night, Mom," I said. She got on the elevator and left. I took the lasagna into my kitchen. I sat down at my island, alone in the quiet apartment. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't look at my phone. I realized then that I hadn't lost my family. I had lost the parasites. What remained, my parents, flawed and broken as they were, was something real. We were starting over from zero. No money, no transactions, just truth. I took a bite of the lasagna. It was cold, but it tasted better than that cupcake ever had. I was 30 years old. My bank account was full. My apartment was peaceful. And for the first time, I wasn't waiting for the phone to ring. I was just living.